Time specifiers in the German language are crazy weird. Now, I should stress at the beginning that if you get this wrong, it's a fairly minor mistake, so maybe don't sweat this one too terribly much. But if you want to master this language and speak it flawlessly, there are some weird rules you've got to learn here and just sort of internalize. And unfortunately, these rules don't seem like they make a lot of sense. It just is what it is. The example sentence for today's episode is, the opening is this Friday. Great. Let's take a bit of a sidetrack right at the top. You might think that the word for the opening in German should be die Öffnung, because the verb for to open in German is öffnen. It should be, maybe, but it isn't, because the word open in English is a little bit ambiguous. For example, to open, you can use the word to open in English to mean like I'm opening the door or the window or the cupboard, or I could open the visor on my helmet. If you're physically opening something, the translation into German is öffnen. Ich öffne das Fenster. I'm opening the window. Great. If you watched the previous episode on this channel, you might also remember ich mache das Fenster auf. That's another way of saying I'm opening the window. But we also in German have the verb öffnen, which corresponds to the English verb open. Great. But there's another verb in German that we have to learn here, and that is eröffnen. What's the difference between öffnen und eröffnen? Well, in English, if we... hello, Calgary Tower. In English, if we're opening something in an abstract sense, let's say we own a chain of retail stores or restaurants or something, we're opening a new location, or there's a grand opening this weekend of a new outlet mall, or we could talk about like the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games. You might think that should be die Öffnungszeremonie, and maybe it should be, but it isn't, because in German, when we're speaking in the abstract sense of the word open, we use the verb eröffnen. Die Eröffnungszeremonie is the opening ceremonies. Okay, let's get back on the main track. Our example sentence is, the opening is this Friday. How do we say that in German? Well, in German, with time specifiers, you can use a preposition. And in fact, it's normal when you're describing something that's going to happen on a specific day, it's normal to use the preposition an. An, you might remember from previous episodes on this channel, or from your grammar textbook, is what they call a two-way preposition, or a bidirectional preposition. That means that it can either take the accusative case or the dative case for what comes after it, depending on what you're talking about. If you're describing the static, unmoving location, either literally or figuratively of something, then you use the dative case. So, die Eröffnung ist an diesem Freitag. Diesem Freitag, dative case, because an is describing something here that's not moving. Friday is a fixed day in the week. It's not going to move, so we use dative case. Great. But did you know that the preposition is optional there in German? You don't have to use a preposition when you're describing when something is going to happen. You could also say, die Eröffnung ist diesen Freitag. Diesen Freitag is accusative case. But why is it accusative case? Shouldn't it be nominative case? Well, you might be thinking, okay, well, it's the direct object of the sentence. The opening is this Friday. This Friday is the object of the sentence, so why wouldn't it be accusative case? Well, think about it. In German, fairly early on, you learned that if the main verb in your sentence is any conjugation of sein, to be, then what follows the verb is not the object of the sentence, but rather some kind of subject predicate. It's expressed in the nominative case. For example, ich bin ein Mann. You wouldn't say ich bin einem. You wouldn't say ich bin einen Mann. Accusative case. Because that sentence in German, strange as it may sound, does not have an object. It only has a subject. I am a man. Okay. It's all expressed in the nominative in German, which is a little bit strange. But hang on, because it gets stranger. This also works in the negation, by the way. If you say, ist kein Hund, he's not a dog, you wouldn't say, ist keinen Hund, accusative case, because again, the main verb in that sentence is ist, which is another conjugation of sein. Therefore, your sentence in German does not have an object. It does not have anything to express in the accusative case. Rather, the whole sentence is expressed in the nominative case because you have effectively one big subject there. Okay, so let's go back to our example sentence. The opening is this Friday. The main verb in this sentence is going to be some conjugation of sein, to be. So shouldn't it be Die Eröffnung ist dieser Freitag, nominative case? Well, maybe it should be, but it isn't. And the reason why it isn't is very historical. This is not something that is specific to the German language. Believe it or not, this is Proto-Indo-European. And a bunch of languages that derive from that all do this the same way. You look at Russian, you look at Latin, you look at Sanskrit, you look at Icelandic, they all express time specifiers in the accusative case as the object of the sentence. German just kind of picked this up for historical reasons, and they still do it to this day. It's more complicated in German because you can use a preposition with your time specifier in German, and the preposition that you use might affect the case that goes with it. Oof, that was a big pothole. Might affect the case that goes with it. For example, seit is a dative preposition in German. What that means in practical terms is that whatever comes after it must be expressed in the dative case. Ich lerne schon seit Jahren die deutsche Sprache. Jahren, dative case, because seit requires dative case. There are other prepositions that we've seen, such as an, which can either take dative or accusative, depending on what you're talking about, and with time specifiers, it's typically going to be dative. An diesem Freitag. But if you don't use a preposition in German to express your time specifier, then by default, it gets expressed in the accusative case. Ich lerne jeden Tag. Jeden Tag, accusative case, because there's no preposition there. Ich rufe dich diesen Samstag an. I'm going to call you this Saturday. We express that again in the accusative case because it's a time specifier that doesn't have a preposition in front of it. Now this gets even more complicated in German. That's right, we're not done yet because there are some other time specifiers, time specifier constructs in German that for, again, weird historical reasons require some other case. For example, eines Tages werde ich nach Südamerika fliegen. One day or someday I will fly to South America. You'll note that we said eines Tages, genitive case. Wait, what? Why? Why is it genitive case? That's possessive, isn't it? Well, again, there are historical reasons why we express some time specifiers in German in the genitive case instead of accusative or dative. Oh boy. If your head is spinning, don't feel bad. This is crazy arbitrary and it doesn't make a lot of sense. The German language usually is pretty logical with its rules and it's pretty consistent with how it applies those rules, but there are some exceptions here and there that you just have to internalize. Now I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the episode, that if you get this wrong, by and large, it's not a big deal. If you said Die Eröffnung ist dieser Freitag, nominative case, your meaning is perfectly understood. You're not going to get a blank stare from a German person on that one. They might not even bother to correct you because it's a pretty small mistake. But, so maybe don't sweat this one too terribly much, but if you want to master this language and speak as a native speaker speaks, you will have to internalize this, even though it's kind of weird. Now, before we close out this episode, a viewer from England who used to live in Calgary asked me to do a drive-by of this Calgary landmark. This is the Calgary Board of Education statue. These things have always freaked me out ever since I was a little kid. I really don't like them. But the proportions of these statues are such that if you stand at the base of them looking up, it's the same height difference as a small child looking up at grown-ups. I guess it's supposed to symbolize that we were all this small once and try to remind you what that feels like. But, I mean, look at these things. They have no faces. It's so creepy. Anyway, there you go. Just for you. So, that'll do it for today's episode. We will see you next time on Lernen und Fahren. God, I love this bike.